Hi guys, this is the first reading wrap-up of one complete month that I'm filming in ages. I haven't felt like I've had a worthy enough reading month to be turned into a wrap-up in ages, in at least a year, I think. I can't even remember when my last monthly wrap-up was. I reserve the right for the future to return to a system of recent reading highlights videos, or maybe best and worst reads of recent times videos. But for now, let's hope that my reading continues to be solid enough for monthly wrap-ups in 2024. This month, or last month rather, January, has been one of those solid months with both its ups and its downs. At least I feel like my downs, my worst reads, my not so good reads, are interesting enough for a reading wrap-up. I'm also experimenting with my new webcam and filming these videos with my webcam after a rather horrific argument I've had with my camera earlier. The camera is still working, I'm just not talking to it. So for now, let's see how this works out with the webcam. But without further ado, let's get into the books. My first book is the only non-fiction book that I finished this month, and it is, for a change, a German book. It's The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben, here obviously in the German original, Das geheime Leben der Bäume. And this is exactly what it says on the tin. It is about the life of trees, which is hidden in the sense that most laypersons, are not aware of what trees are going through in the course of their lives. So this is about how trees grow from the seed to being a fully grown tree, how they grow, how they die, and what challenges they face in between, and how they weather these challenges or how they don't. It is also about the ecosystem forest as a whole, and specifically about the differences between naturally grown forests and cultivated and managed forest land. Peter Wohlleben is in fact not a biologist, but a forest ranger, or he used to be at least. And this is pretty apparent, I would say, in his writing style, in his way to talk about trees and the forest and biological processes. His way of talking about these things sounds extremely unscientific. And this is, to a large degree, I suspect, just for simplification's sake. This book is written for people who have next to no prior exposure to the subject, and who remember dimly at best their school days and biology class, elementary biology class almost, I would say. So this book simplifies matters enough that people with absolutely no prior knowledge can keep up with it. Sometimes I think this simplification and the unscientific language obscures things rather to the narrative's disadvantage, or to my disadvantage at least, because I think for me matters sometimes became unintelligible when Wohlleben was talking about biological processes in terms of the tree thinks it is better to act in such and such a way, or the tree remembers things from the year before and acts according to this knowledge. And every time he talks like that, I wonder, what does this actually mean in actual scientific biological terms? What does it mean when a tree thinks? What is the tree reacting to? And sometimes Wohlleben will actually return to some of these unscientific expressions chapters later and will acknowledge the fact that he was being unscientific and will give you his reasons for that. The reasons more often than not being that we simply don't know how these processes work. However, sometimes he doesn't return to the expression, and I am left wondering what could be meant by it. So that was a bit grating, but other than that, I enjoyed it, even though I usually prefer more scientific, more scholarly writing. In fact, I'm treating this as an appetite whetter for Merlin Sheldrake's Entangled Life, which I mean to pick up soon. And I think that one will be much more scientific in nature and in diction than Peter Wohllebens book. On the other hand, this book has already made me more aware of certain aspects on the trees, certain characteristics on the trees that I pass on my way to the bus stop or to work or on my lunch break when I take a walk through the park. And it has made me look at the trees that I pass in a different light. And at the end of the day, that is all that I want from the books that I read, that they make me see the world in a different light. And in this way, this book was extremely successful, and therefore it made for an extremely successful start to the reading year. And that is also why I would recommend this book to anybody short of biologists and ecologists and people who've been working with trees for quite some time, and for whom this book would be much too basic. But for everybody else, I think this would be a very rewarding read. I bought The Hidden Life of Trees on my birthday as a gift to myself, and I don't regret it. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the other book that I bought on my birthday, the other German book that I bought on my birthday and have already read as well. It is Corpus Delicti by Juli Zeh, which is called The Method in the English translation. This is a near future dystopia. It was published in 1998, if I'm not mistaken, and is set in the 21st century. And as a dystopia, it is a critique of philosophies, political philosophies, economic philosophies, in which the individual owes health and functionality to the community, and in which all of life is streamlined in the service of production, whereby human life and the human being is reduced to being a means of production at the end of the day. And The Method, which is the English title of the book, is the name of the system, the state system, but also the political philosophy and the state philosophy that permeates all of life in this society in which the book is set. And it is one in which, like I just mentioned, the individual owes health and purity and health of spirit as well to the community. This is collectivist on a surface level by appearance, but is in fact, if you think about it for more than a second, an uber-capitalistic way of thinking, in which the individual is reduced to being a cog in the wheel and a means of production. And in this system, the authoritarian state apparatus and the judicial system, which are indistinguishable, control every citizen's life down to the most minute aspect of everyday life, to ensure that everybody keeps healthy and everybody plays their part in the healthy community that is the state. But of course, in the vein of similar dystopias, for instance, 1984 with its authoritarian state, or also Fahrenheit 451, there is an individual in the center of this story who has a moment a prolonged moment of awakening in which she begins to question the legitimacy of this whole system. I'm afraid this would give every simplistic and in-your-face stupid YA dystopia out there a run for its money. It reads like it was written by a very young person who attended 1 or 2 college lectures and had an epiphany, and now has to tell as many people as possible about it, thinking that it is an exceptional thing to have understood about the world and about the rationalities under which our systems work, when really it isn't, for people who have thought about these things for more than 10 minutes in their lives, and people who don't live under a rock. I mean, Juli Zeh was quite young when she wrote this novel, so maybe this is exactly what happened. And it's not just this broad topic that is really nothing new. It goes down to the details. She writes about the most mundane things, like they were the most extraordinary things anybody could have thought up. There's 1 or 2 paragraphs on pages 54 and 55. I gave this over 100 pages, but really it was over on page 55. I'd like to quote these paragraphs just to give you an idea of how not very exceptional the things in here are, but how very exceptional the author seems to have thought that they are. The paragraphs are from an episode in which our protagonist is at court and is being questioned by the judge about the state of her mental health. She is depressed, has been depressed for a while, and there were other things going on with her mental health-wise. And she tells the judge, Mia is the protagonist, she tells the judge, reading in German now, niemand, sagt Mia, kann nachvollziehen, was ich durchmache, nicht einmal ich selbst. Wäre ich ein Hund, ich würde mich ankläffen, damit ich nicht näher komme. Neues Kapitel, Überschrift, nicht dafür gemacht, verstanden zu werden. Mias Stimme ist leise geworden, weil sie weiß, dass Sätze wie der vom kläffenden Hund nicht dafür gemacht sind, verstanden zu werden. English translation. Nobody, says Mia, is able to understand what I'm going through, not even myself. If I were a dog, I would bark at myself to keep me from coming nearer. Chapter break. New chapter heading. Not made to be understood. Mia's voice has grown quiet because she knows that phrases like that about the barking dog are not made to be understood. Girl, please, everybody understands this phrase about the barking dog. This was so completely ridiculous to have it spelled out, expressis verbis, by the author, that she thinks that this is the most insightful thing anybody could ever have thought up about this frame of mind, and nobody has ever thought in similar terms about this state of mind. And I was really done with this book at this moment, to be honest. And of course, I mean, I wonder what I expected picking up contemporary German literature. It's just always a ridiculous disappointment like that. Served me right, honestly. On to more positive things. I read the second book in the long prize Quartet by Daniel Abraham called A Betrayal in Winter. This is a bind-up of the first 2 books called A Shadow in Summer and A Betrayal in Winter. This is classic epic fantasy in a world that, in a very classic way, resembles our world in early modern pre-industrial times, and the story is set specifically in a land which is reminiscent of pre-modern India, with elements of pre-modern Japan, feudal Japan thrown in. I say land because it's not a country really, it's more like a loose conglomeration of city-states, each with a rather large territory. And what sets these states apart from their neighbors is that there is a certain kind of magic in them, in which the wizards are called poets, and they have acquired the ability to bind abstract concepts into a human form and mind control them and make them do their bidding on behalf of the ruler of their state. And that can give these states enormous economic advantage. For instance, in one state, their abstract concept is that it can make the seeds fall out of fruits, of any kind of fruit from a plant. In their case, it is cotton. So their abstract concept can make the seeds fall out of a whole warehouse full of cotton just in the blink of an eye. And that, of course, makes this city the most interesting port to sell cotton to and to process cotton. And in another state, their concept is to make stone soft, which makes mining more easy and quicker. And that is great, of course, but on the other hand, the reverse of the medal is that if and when these concepts rebel successfully, it can leave enormous wreckage in its place. We've already seen that happen in book 1. We don't see it happen in book 2, but it is understood, I think, that we will see it again and to a much larger extent in the books to come. I have to say I liked the first book much better, A Shadow in Summer. In this one, A Betrayal in Winter, the characters were so frustrating, or two characters in particular. One of them, whom we already knew from book 1, is just always acting in a way that seemed nonsensical to me. At first, they were an awful stickler to the rules for no good reason, really. And then they blabbered out important secrets to other characters whom they'd known for about 5 seconds, just because the plot demanded it. And then there was a new character whose frustration with the world and the society that they were born into I understood perfectly. However, I thought that their ways of rebelling against it were really unreasonable. And it was clear that they could only lead to disaster. And also, I was frustrated by the book when it was never acknowledged that you can't really keep riding the moral high horse if your way of combating the assholes who run this world is to become more like the assholes. You can't really keep riding the moral high horse if you do that. And that was never acknowledged anywhere in the book, and that frustrated me to no end as well. On the other hand, I liked that in this book, for the first time, we got into the head of one of the wizards, the poets, who control an abstract concept. This wasn't the case, if I remember correctly, in book 1. In book 2, for the first time, one of these poets is a viewpoint character, and that was fascinating to read. And I was also, again, very taken with how much time Daniel Abraham takes to develop his characters and to make their actions seem plausible and psychologically coherent in the world that they live in. And although I didn't enjoy book 2 as much as book 1, I'm still looking forward to reading An Autumn War, book 3. And of course, the resolution to it all, The Price of Spring, as soon as possible, really. And I also read another installment in another fantasy series that I'm reading at the moment, and that was To Blackfyre Keep by Anthony Ryan, which is the fourth book in the Seven Swords series, which is a series of epic fantasy novellas. This was one of the longer ones of about 120, 130 pages. And although these books are so short, they still pack a whole lot of epicness in them. And that is mostly because they are conventional enough in the world building that Anthony Ryan is able to rely on the reader's ability to expand upon the information that they are given about the world and to construct a coherent image of a complete fantasy world with very little information, in fact, that is given on the page. The whole series started in book one with the protagonist going on a pilgrimage with a small group of people to a so-called mad god to make a supplication. He is going to ask this mad god thing to rid him of the demon-possessed sword that he is carrying and to which he is bound and that he can't get rid of. He starts out alone, but in the course of the story, in the course of the series, he acquires a small fellowship and it becomes a quest story. From the beginning, it is also very much an adventure story. The first novella in particular was reminiscent of a video game with the challenges happening in very quick succession and getting larger and larger up until the final boss, the mad god. Books 2 and 3 reminded me of a classic pen and paper role-playing game. The first one, so book 2, being an action-adventure again, and book 3 more of a murder mystery. And book 4, To Blackfyre Keep, is just a classic action-adventure role-playing game again. All these stories are just plain good fun, but the series also has a certain gravitas to it because the protagonist has a troubled past, to put it mildly. So there is a certain serious side to this series as well, and that makes it, as a whole, very rounded and very satisfying to read, I think. There was another shortish fantasy novella that I read, which was not quite so successful, and to be honest, I don't even know what to say about it because it is so baffling to me what people might possibly see in this one. And it is a classic. It is Elric of Melniboné. I don't even know what to say about it. I thought that the writing was atrocious. The style is archaizing, which is fitting for the kind of story that it is, being set as your typical fantasy novel is in a pre-modern, early modern, or maybe late medieval-ish, European-ish kind of setting. However, Michael Moorcock, the author, is just not a great stylist, a great writer. I thought that the way it was told, with the auctorial voice of the narrator and just the extremely wooden style, was really just so clunky and so unappealing. I really, if you have enjoyed Michael Moorcock's writing before, and in particular Elric of Melniboné, please tell me how you could stomach this writing. I'd really like to know, because it baffled me so completely how anybody could possibly enjoy reading Elric. I was really dumbfounded from the first page to the last. My next book was also a disappointment, and this one made me rather sad because it had been on my TBR for ages and I was really excited when I finally got to it, but it just fell short of expectations. It's Monkey Beach by Eden Robinson. This is set in British Columbia on the coast in a, is it First Nation in Canada? a First Nation community on the coast of British Columbia, and the story is that our narrator's brother has gone missing during a fishing trip, and everybody is looking for him in a certain place, but our narrator suspects that he is rather to be found on Monkey Beach, which is a place that was significant during their childhood. The narrator is only 19 and her brother is even younger, but clearly this is meant to be the kind of book in which a child narrator tells the story of the adults between the lines, and the child's view is a kind of commentary on the adult world. So think like To Kill a Mockingbird or The God of Small Things, only this book is nowhere near as good as any of those. The problem is that whatever story is there gets bogged down in endless episodes about childhood life that aren't all that interesting, and although they are set in this native community, they aren't all that special or all that different from childhood anywhere else. And when she is talking about things that are maybe specific about her community and about knowledge that is specific to her community, it is done in a rather clunky way that is really more like ethnographic writing. For instance, there is an episode in which we are told how the people traditionally produce oil or get oil from a certain kind of fish. And instead of elegantly weaving it into the story, she just tells us in a long paragraph, a page-long paragraph, about how the fish is processed. And this is just so inelegant, I thought, and just really bad storytelling, bad writing. It's really just ethnographic writing mixed in here without being in any kind of way woven into the story. It was completely unenjoyable to me, and I gave it, I think, 150 pages, and then I gave up. So this was a rather sad disappointment. My next one was not a disappointment, but just not much to write home about either. It's This Rough Magic by Josh Lanyon, a gay crime novella set in the 1950s, and in this one, a priceless manuscript of Shakespeare's The Tempest is stolen from a private collector. Oh, bother. I was just very underwhelmed by this. It seemed extremely formulaic, and there was just nothing special about it. And most disappointingly, it is written in dual perspective again. Josh Lanyon is normally the author of single perspective, which, as you know, I prefer in romance writing. But this one, as in fact, I think all of her historical novels and novellas, is written in dual perspective, so that was another disappointment, and I think I may have to stay away from Josh Lanyon's historicals, although I did enjoy Snowball in Hell a whole lot last year. And this one is also a historical written in dual perspective, so you never know, sometimes you find a gem among them. And with that, we come to the last book of this wrap-up, and the last book that I actually read and finished in January. And I have saved the best for last. This book, in fact, might end up on my best of the year list 2024. And I may have found a new favorite author. The book is Notes from the Burning Age, and the author is Claire North. This is post-apocalyptic fiction, long post-apocalyptic. The burning age in the title is in fact our age, the age that is shaped by us burning fossil fuels, and the age that got warmer and warmer until it ended at last in a big conflagration, a catastrophic event or chain of events of some kind, which destroyed a large part of the world's population and society, culture, economics, etc. A real watershed event after which humanity had to start afresh in most significant ways and had to reinvent itself and redefine its relationship with nature and the way they wanted to exist in relation to nature and the way they wanted to use technology. And they decided, as you might guess, for using clean technology. However, a lot of the old knowledge and the old technological expertise still survives. But the archives are kept under lock and key by an organization that is a lot like a church. The people of that time have a religion that is theistic in nature, and in it, every living thing and also broader concepts taken from the natural world have a spirit. So think of the spirit of the forest from Princess Mononoke. And in fact, it was the spirits, the big spirits, that rose up when humanity overdid it with their burning and their destruction of the natural world. And they swiped the earth clean of humanity for the most part. People in the future kind of worship these spirits and pray to them in their temples, but it is understood that these spirits are not like the gods of our religions that we know, who have a certain kind of special relationship with humans, whereas the spirits, it is understood, could not care less about human beings unless they come close to destroying the world. So their prayers and their rituals are more like reminders to themselves. They are supposed to remind people of the past and of the importance of balance and restraint when it comes to how they treat the environment, the world all around them. But of course, people, or some people, just like in the famous notes from somewhere else, are not content living a peaceful, quiet life in a world that is as close to a utopia as you can get, but they demand access to the old knowledge so that humanity might unfold its true potential again and rise again above the natural world and dominate the natural world, because obviously that is what humans with all their superior potential are meant to do. And these people are unjustifiably and irrationally convinced that this path will lead to ultimate happiness and fulfillment and the best possible life. Which, spoilers, it won't. It leads only to destruction and maybe even to war. The story that is actually unfolding in this book and in this setting is, at the end of the day, a spy thriller and a political thriller. Only thriller makes it sound extremely fast-paced, which it is not. It's quite slow and extremely low-key and understated for a spy novel. The world building is also done very slowly, very carefully. The only somewhat wonky aspects in it are that I thought it sometimes seemed rather arbitrary what kind of knowledge, technological knowledge, people are still using and how they get the resources for it, how the technology is actually produced. And when some people finally got access to broader knowledge, it also seems rather unbelievable how quickly they were able to apply this theoretical knowledge, and it was a complete mystery where the resources for the application came from. And yet I found that I didn't mind this wonkiness all that much, because it seemed rather beside the point. The point of the book is obviously that it is a parable for human nature, And I think it is also a thought experiment of what it would be like to be inside the mind of a person that has grown up in this time and in this kind of life, with this kind of lifestyle, with this kind of relationship with the natural world. And that was such a treat. I loved how the protagonist and narrator wasn't exaggerated in any way. He is not a hippie, he is not a zealot in his protectiveness of what he thinks is the right way. He is just very down to earth. Never has an attribute be more fitting. He is very quietly persistent and very tuned into himself and into his truth and his convictions. He is inward looking without being solipsistic, and he is also very, very open to the world around him and experiences, influences from the natural world. And consistently being in this very thoughtful and very sensitive head was really like a dream, sometimes even a fever dream. He has a very strong, unique voice, and reading him was really just such a treat. This was the perfect book to snuggle up with under a blanket on a cold winter night, a cold January night, and just get lost in his head. And I even felt a bit lonely when it was over and I was not one with the narrator anymore. Absolutely my favorite book of the month, and I'm sure it will be one of my favorite top 10 favorite books of 2024. And that makes January, all in all, an extremely successful reading month, I think. I hope your reading year 2024 has started in a similarly portentous way. Do tell me what your favorite read of January or of the beginning of the year up to now has been. I'd see you again very soon, guys. Bye.